Welcome to the Parker Podcast Collection.
I suck, you suck, I suck at Call of Duty. You suck. You suck. You suck.
Welcome to the Not Playing Podcast. My name's Rob Howard, and this week I'm joined by
Ian Bruce
and Patrick Kay.
You can contact us on email at notplayingpodcast@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at notplayingpod. So yeah, we had some very interesting details on the Oculus Rift recently. First we got the release date, which they're saying is going to be the first quarter of 2016. And we also had the recommended specs unveiled, which I found kind of fortunate, as in I have them.
Yes.
Except the one thing I don't have, and I'm sorry to kick this off with such a boring thing, but do you think USB 3 is going to be an issue?
Yep,
Without doubt.
absolutely.
That's a real bummer, that is.
That's a real bottleneck if you haven't got it.
It has to transfer
So I'm
data
gonna need to buy-
very quickly to a place, and if you're using the old-fashioned 2, you're a bit stuffed. But it'll still work. You won't get the best experience, certainly.
So we are limited with how much resolution we can actually push through HDMI as well. Like the current HDMI, you wouldn't be able to run 4K in stereo at 90 hertz. Like you won't be able to do that with the current HDMI.
So I'm going to need a new motherboard.
You can get USB 3 cards that you can plug into your motherboard?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, can you?
I think you can get them with 4
Oh, so
USB 3 slots or 2. Amazon have them. If you look up USB 3
Oh yeah,
cards.
I'm sure and that'll just work with like on a normal PCI
If you've got slots in
slot or whatever.
The 970 is smaller than other. It's got a smaller footprint than like the 760 and the 680 and stuff, hasn't it? So I think
Yeah.
it's not as massive as previous iterations.
It's not a huge card, no. Oh, well, that's great then.
I would say
So-
these specs though, they're
You would
not.
what?
I would say of these specs, they don't necessarily apply to the very top end stuff. I mean not the elites and your Star Citizens and stuff like that. As a general rule of thumb for the majority of apps, yeah, definitely, this is already the case that a system like that's going to do. But unless this whole unless the whole DirectX 12 thing is it really is as impressive. It's
Please
like
God.
if you're gonna yeah, I really hope it is. But your real high end stuff like Star Citizen, I think you're still going to need a bit of a beefier system than the one that they've stated.
Or just turn shit
to
down.
get the most out of it, or just turn stuff down.
Yeah.
Well, at the moment it'll be turning everything down because Star Citizen does not run well in VR whatsoever, unfortunately.
So sorry, before we continue any further, can we just like reel this off? Basically, for the full Rift experience, Oculus recommend the following: an NVIDIA GTX 970 or AMD 290 equivalent or greater, an Intel i5 4590 equivalent or greater, 8 GB of RAM, a compatible HDMI 1.3 video output. I assume that's on that card, isn't it?
It's on the 970, I think. Yeah, I don't know anything about the 2.
Yeah, I would assume so. 2 times USB 3 ports and Windows 7 Service Pack 1 or newer. Which, that's kind of in line with like the kind of recommended specs that a lot of games, like a lot of modern AAA games, are putting out now. So, I wasn't too surprised. I can't imagine they've been, they kind of want to be in that wheelhouse. If someone's going to be most people that are interested in this are the people that are going to be trying to, run those sort of games, I would imagine. And so they'd be foolish to say otherwise. So, like you say,
the real story here, the real reason why this announcement is important and it is important, is because developers need it. Developers need to know when the Rift is coming out, and they need to know what sort of systems they're targeting. Because if they don't know who they're writing for. And when it's something as high-end as VR, the specs are massively important. Absolutely hugely important.
So they've basically said, sorry to cut you off, they've basically said that they are targeting high-end, hobbyist PC gamers with this.
They've been saying that for about 3 years, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, yeah. I just think that needs to be emphasised, because I don't think people realise, like, quite the sort of specs that are needed for this. And a lot of people sort of see the Rift as just like this thing you're going to buy, it's just going to work. But, you know, you do need some grunt to run it, you know.
That's right with the developer side of things, but it's also... It's a requirement for people that are buying any device for any PC that they check that their shit can run it before they spend potentially hundreds of pounds/dollars on something that might not. And I suspect all of us have at some point looked at something shiny, bought it, and then realised, fuck, that's not going to work in my PC, and then spent substantially more money upgrading your PC to justify the tiny little thing you bought that you don't want to be beaten by. I've got a friend who's done that.
I guess.
I think people have a responsibility to check that it's going to work, and Oculus have fulfilled their side of that responsibility by saying, look, this is the shit you need to get the recommended experience. I agree with you that it's kind of it's a high-end and possibly... It's not elitist, it's not master race, for want of a better term, but it's the higher-end PC. It might be the mid-end PC by March next year. If 970s ever come down in price, why would they now? They can leave them at 280, 300 quid in the UK, because anybody who wants a Rift is going to be buying one. The 290s are like 80 quid cheaper, which is good, but I don't really want an AMD thing. However...
no hair works for you, otherwise.
Exactly. Maybe that would cure all my anger in last week's show, or next week's show, whichever way it goes out.
No idea.
But yeah, I mean, it was always going to be a high spec system to run it at first. I don't think that was really a surprise for anyone, really. But I don't think it's going to be a big deal. It's like anything else. There's always a slightly, you know, when anything's new, it's always a little bit harder to get into, isn't it? It's not like it's not like you know, the first TVs were affordable to everyone when they first came out.
It's the first iteration of this version of VR. I think somebody else will get to market first. One of the Gear VRs, I'm sure, will be out of developer version or whatever they call it. What do they call it? Innovator Edition. They'll drop the Innovator tag before the Rift comes out. I think for a more consumer version, a more consumer VR experience, I think the Morpheus for the PS4 will be the thing that most people use. I think it will be easier to get into. I think Sony have thrown enough money at the VR experiences, at least based on feedback from the Silicon Valley VR thing last week, that the Morpheus experiences were the ones that were more polished and felt like the best things you could do.
Yeah. Do you know what I think it is as well? Like this a big thing about what's happened with VR over the last 2 years is that, like, you've kind of seen that, like, the limits of VR are actually its strengths. Like, it's essentially having to write for VR is the best way around. Like, before this whole thing happened, we all just thought, yeah, you're going to port Call of Duty into VR and it'd be amazing. And then as soon as we started, you know, trying stuff out, we realised that was the worst idea ever. And the Morpheus is, you know, the Sony's limits are going to be its strengths in that regards, because it's going to mean that people will only make 4 VR experiences for the Morpheus. Like, if you're an indie developer working for PC, there may be a temptation to make a Rift version of your FPS or whatever you're making, just because you can. If you're working in Unity, it's not hard to get a camera in there and get it functioning in VR. But what I'm trying to get at is that I think you're going to get, in the first few years of VR, you're going to get people putting VR support into their apps just because they can, and just because, you know, there's this kind of new niche audience that's arrived. But with the PlayStation, because it's harder to reach those kind of magic specs that are necessary for VR, you know, the high frame rate, etc. I think you're going to get completely tailored experiences for it, and I think that's what the you know, people that have been experiences that these demos have been seeing, is that they're perfect VR only experiences, things that would probably be very boring if you just gave someone a controller and a meat space screen to play them on. So yeah, I think that the Morpheus's strengths are basically its weaknesses. It's because they'll have to make things specially for it. And I think that's a totally a good thing. It's a 100% a good thing.
Yeah, well, when you see like there's news that like companies like Ubisoft and Sony are like setting up these studios specifically for the Morpheus, I can totally imagine, because they've got such a big install base, Sony, already, and if all they're asking people to do is like buy this extra thing, like they did with, for example, Kinect for the Xbox. As long as they're like sort of in that kind of price point, and they say, look, we've got Assassin's Creed experience that's VR, you know, a Watch Dogs thing that's VR. You know, it's that big branding and like marketing that I think is going to kind of win people over, and you know, be interesting to see what they do with that.
As Pat said, they can't just VRize Watch Dogs. They have to. No,
it will be. It will. Sorry, I know what you're saying. It will be a specific VR version of that. You know, it'll be like the Animus experience, the real
awesome.
Animus experience. You know,
yeah.
Yeah, well, that's how they'll market it, because they're already going that, you know, that the fiction supports VR so well. Of course, it would be Assassin's Creed.
Absolutely, yeah. Jesus.
Yeah, well, I mean, both their franchises, really. And yeah, you're right, like, Ubisoft have got some strong franchises to use in VR. But I do think, even though I'm really excited to see what, like, these AAA sort of releases are going to be, like, I still think that for a long time now, and probably for quite a while into the future, I think it is going to be indie as you know, the kind of where you're going to get the most interesting stuff in VR. Because of it's such an experimental medium at the moment, and Ubisoft can't afford to take massive risks and do something that's really quirky and interesting.
When was the last time they did that? 19 something.
Yeah. I also think it'll be a while before we see VR's killer app as well. I think it's going to be we're going to have to get well out of the phase of thinking about, I could put VR in this. We need to get like way beyond that before you see something that comes up that's just like, wow, snap, that is a VR game. This is something that just could not exist anywhere else. Because I just have no idea what that thing's going to be.
And when you do, I'll do the scripting for you, mate.
So yeah, we've got some other news regarding like just software support, middleware. First of all, UE4 now supports Steam VR, which I guess is nice.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's just great, I guess, as far as porting things between different.
Go on, Rob,
I don't know.
talking.
No, I don't know. Why is that good then?
It's good because Steam VR has the possibility to normalise all of the code that everybody writes, all the way people do shit. If Steam VR, hopefully, can be this thing that everybody else writes for, and then Steam VR just works with magical devices, that would be fantastic. Because at the moment there are so many different devices coming out. As a developer, you want to write one thing once, and that works with everything.
In other words, being able to run the Vive and the Oculus Rift on through the same system,
and everything else. If Steam VR does it, or OS VR does it, if somebody could do it, that would be extremely useful for developers. So Steam, quite well respected, unless you're a modder for Skyrim, perhaps.
Did you know there's a whole community in that? I know I haven't tried this myself, but there's people using Google Cardboard and a streaming app, and basically they're just running Steam games with TriDef, which is what I use for running stuff on the 3D TV, getting like a side-by-side version of whatever 3D game they're playing and streaming it to their like Android phones and in cardboard. So they're basically making these very, very high latency wireless VR headsets.
There is software you can get that will do that for you. I will try Zen or something. We had a new HMD at work, one of the gazillion we've had at work recently, and it's just a cardboard. It's a plastic cardboard basically, as so many of them are. But it streams whatever's on your screen basically to the device using this software on your phone. So you have the software running on your PC and the software running on your phone, and it just streams it to your phone. And that's
so it's like virtual desktop, but to your phone.
So you can get games running, VR games that playing on your desktop, and then you look at them or control them with the Android device, and that's freely available. And I'll try and remember that when we're not trying to get through a big list of.
I think that's the thing I'm talking about. To be fair, I think that's the thing they're using. But yeah, it's interesting how there's just so many. There's already just so many different sides to it. So many uses and people finding different ways of using it. Like I was playing The Witcher in VR. Doing it that same way. Like, so I made it 3D. I've been playing it on my TV in 3D, and I just put it in virtual desktop, and then I had essentially like a 3D cube map of like this beautiful kind of meadow at sunset, and I just had that as the background behind me, and I was just playing The Witcher on like an IMAX screen, just in front of me.
Was it?
But yeah,
was
like
it like
so
you?
many,
Sorry,
so
was it like
weird,
you?
quirky ways of using it? Sorry, Rob. Yeah.
I was just saying, so you're playing a third-person game in VR?
Yeah. Oh, third-person stuff works really well in VR, like incredibly well. Like that's why Lucky's Tale's being made. Loads of the things I play on Gear VR are third-person platformers or sort of roguelikes where you're controlling a little character.
I suppose you're just like floating around, I guess, behind them, but it just feels that much more real.
It's normally not floating cameras as much, although it was when I played, because I played bits of Skyrim like that as well, just like over the shoulder of the character, and you can like look all around you and stuff. It's actually a really good way of playing those sort of games because you don't have to control the camera manually anymore. You don't have to use your thumb to move the camera around. You just look around. It's a way more sort of natural way of doing it. And in Lucky's Tale, they use it in game mechanics as well. So you use it to aim at things. So he has like a projectile weapon, and you can aim at targets with your head, and then you can fire from the third person character. So yeah, like third person stuff works really well.
Cool.
Yeah.
I look forward to experimenting with that. This has been the Not Playing Podcast in partnership with notlistening.co.uk. You can contact us on email at notplayingpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at notplayingpod. You can find the show notes for this show at notlistening.co.uk. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, then please do give us a review. Also, I just wanted to point out that our soundtrack is now being done by Miracle of Sound. So yeah, thanks Gav for letting us use your music.
Gav.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's all for now. Thanks for listening. See ya. Bye.
With no booty, my friend, I'm inclined to agree, 'cause I suck. You suck. I suck.